Let's start by just taking a nice inhale and exhale through your nose. For the remainder of this time, you're going to focus on using your breath to settle the body in its most natural state, relaxing all the tension in your jaw, your brows. Relax the corners of your mouth. Let gravity do what it needs to do. Relax the shoulders. You can notice any sensation in your body. Don't change it, just you can notice it and let it all go. And begin to move into the focus of your mind. And we're going to start releasing a relaxing speech. Obviously, you're not talking, but any chit-chat or conversations and dialogues you're having, just save it for later and let it go. Your focus of this meditation is relaxation. That's it. And then move to your mind and start to release any images, thoughts, any grasping of things in the future, or nostalgia in the past, feelings of anxiety, fear, frustrations, or even excitement and joy. Just let that all wash away like water, like the ocean. Nice. Nice. Really good, you guys. Really good. Much better than last week. How did that feel? Okay. 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 It's not going to feel like, oh, but it will feel like you can relax and just take it easy. Was that okay for all of you or most of you? Were there any problems that anyone had? You're sleepy. Yeah. Are you tired in general? Yeah, you're just tired. Yeah, we're going to talk about that too. You can't be tired. Are you just fatigued in general? Yeah. 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 Okay. Fair. That's good. Okay. Well, that's something that you just observed. No problem. Okay. Anything else? Any other issues?
Was distracted by them talking.
The noise. Mm-hmm.
But only in the beginning, and then seems to go away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing that's interesting about shamatha is that you utilize, I mean, don't utilize, but you don't need to void out noises technically to do the meditation. It's actually great for city dwellers. Um, you just let it, like you said, it probably, you notice it and you're like, what the hell? What's wrong with them? Don't they know we're meditating? Or whatever comes into your mind. Um, and then it kind of just slowly, like you're like, oh wait, that's not my focus. I'll stop bitching. So I'm going to stay focused. So doing it will slowly kind of, it's interesting how that happens. Yeah, good. Okay. Anything else? Anyone else? We're okay? Okay. All right. So we're going to go into, we had done this last class, but it's a Sangha's, Master Sangha's mindfulness of breathing. So we'll do 7 minutes of this and then we'll start class. Okay. It's similar. I'll walk you through it. But most of it is really, you're going to spend the first probably minute or so at this, because we're doing a short sprint. So you'll spend like the minute or so just relaxing and getting back into what you just did the last 5 minutes. And then you'll spend the remainder of the time really starting to very much focus on your breath. But the way that we'll focus on breath will not be at the tip of the nose. It's going to be in the space of your body. So you're going to kind of think of, you know, in the space of your body, it breathing. Yeah. Okay. And that's all you're doing. You're just going to observe, and that's your object. Your object is feeling what it's like to breathe. Okay. So the first meditations that we did was really using your breath, right, as a tool to relax. Now you're going to sit and feel breathing, and you'll do things where you'll observe things that are happening in your body as you start to breathe. You're like, oh, I feel a little tingle, getting goosebumps. It's a little achy. My feet are cold. My toe, actually, my left toe, the pinky one is extra cold. You know, you'll start to have these moments where you can look and observe, but you don't judge and don't attach yourself to the idea, but just simply observe. That's it. Okay. Like, oh, I'm a little achy here, or there's a feeling that goes down my one leg and not my other, or maybe there's certain areas that you'll notice are more hot or cold. So you'll start to just observe. You're really observing the space of your body. Okay, here we go. So for this sit, take a moment and think about your aspirations as to why you're going to meditate to start. Decide right now that for the next 7 minutes, you're not just going to sit to serve yourself, but that perhaps by sitting and taking care of yourself will somehow affect and taking care of others. So have and muster up that motivation of thinking, yes, I will dedicate the next 7 minutes to taking care of myself. knowing that in some way, shape, or form, that will help the people around me. And then begin to descend your mind into settling your body, speech, and mind. Just fully relaxing. Using your breath to release any tension, any noise, any thought. And start to make sure and check in that your awareness feels illuminated, bright. And start to observe the movements of your body from the stillness of your awareness. Try not to label any of the sensations as I or mine. Just observe any tactile sensations you're feeling. Shamatha is not just about breathing, but it's also about having a focus and deliberately looking at the mindfulness of breathing. So begin to selectively focus on those sensations of your body that correlate with the rhythm of your breath. Start to experience the whole body breathing in and out. You now have a certain level of relaxation of body and mind, observing your body and all the tactile sensations. So let's take it to the next level and begin to focus on how to sustain your focus. This will take a little bit more effort, but start to try to be completely relaxed in your full relaxed state to sustain a continuous flow of concentration. As always, use your breath to release any thoughts or tension or noise. Your goal is to sustain your ability of observing the sensations of your body that correlate with your breath. Commit to the next minute being fully focused on the object of your body that correlates with your breath. Nice, everyone. How was that? A little harder? Felt like it was a little harder. Tell me how it went. Talk to me.
I had this weird thing in my throat and it was preventing me
From being able to breathe. Okay. Fair. Anyone else?
Felt a little different.
It felt different.
When I was focusing on the whole body breathing,
Yeah.
I felt like every time I inhaled, no, I only exhaled to release it again. Like it got tenser. Your body gets tenser when you inhale.
Uh-huh.
When you exhale, it just got more relaxed. But
Uh-huh.
it felt like every time I inhaled, I couldn't relax.
You couldn't relax.
It felt a little getting tightening.
Like the inhale felt
Yeah,
like the tighten, but then when you relax, it was like a full.
But I could feel it all throughout.
Uh-huh. Great. When you were doing that, did you feel like you were forcing the breath, or was it just the way that your
It's
breath?
just the way I felt.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was
Great.
just seeing it.
Good.
It just felt different.
Really good. Nice.
Yes, I felt it was like energetic.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's the same similar thing to the tension.
Mm-hmm.
As you breathe in, and trying to find out where the breath is affecting
Yeah.
my body.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And normally I don't feel like I'm aware of
Sure.
anything other than just here.
Right. I usually get body highs when I do this meditation. Like I'll start to feel like this. It's like running the tip of your finger up your body, like down my arms and my legs, and I'm like, ooh, that's nice. You know, like self body massage energy, nice. Okay, good, great. Anyone else? Was this just like, what are you talking about, lady? Huh? A little bit. I felt that way.
honestly didn't even know the object of the meditation
Okay,
was. I was-
great. Okay.
I didn't hear. I wasn't listening when I started.
Yeah, you just checked out.
I totally checked
Okay,
out, yeah.
good. Okay. So you saw that. Anyone else?
I had that like in the middle of it.
In the middle of it was hard. Mhm.
I think my mind rebelled and I kept focusing on my heartbeat.
Yeah.
And then halfway through the meditation, I was deciding should I focus on breath or heartbeat?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Great. Okay. So for those of you that felt like you deviated away from the object, were you able to come back? No, it was just like, I see you later, I'm done. Okay. Heartbeat and breath. I think that's interesting because actually, even for me to sit for this short period of time, I usually don't feel my heartbeat, but this one I did. Maybe I was feeling yours. I don't think you need to decipher between the two of them. You know, I don't think that they're separate. I think it's just a part of it. So I'd be curious to see this week as you start to do your practice, is there something that starts to kind of like at the moment feels like heartbeat, breath, but is there something that starts to blur and bring those two together and it becomes one and the same? Like the idea of body and breath is synonymous, you know? So I wonder if that's indeed true, if the heartbeat can somehow become bigger. Like you'll start to realize not just your heart pulsating, but your whole body is kind of pulsating. You know, I'd be curious to see if that happens. But that's nice that you were able to hear that. Okay, great. So this week, your meditation is to do this. It's basically to spend a couple minutes to relax fully, just let everything go. That's it, just relax. And then spend the remainder of the time just saying, I'm going to feel and focus on my breath, not my breath here, but in the area of my body, right? And just observe what's doing. And it's interesting too, because like Thomas said, you don't really realize the subtleties of your body most of the time. I mean, you might realize like gross subtlety, not gross changes in your body, you know, like I feel bloated, it's cold outside, I'm wet, you know, like there's that. But then there's these subtleties that are happening constantly. So just be present and start to get a sense. You're almost kind of like feeling like the organs in your body, you know, or the organisms in your body. Like you'll start to feel what the pores are doing. It's nice. It's really good. Okay. So today we're going to do class 5 and 6. Um, again, I'm clumping them together so that we can make sure we get all of this course done before the holiday season. Um, we're going to be talking about 5 problems of meditation today that most of you will have in some point of time. And we will also be talking about the 8 antidotes to those 5 problems. One thing I'm going to just note to you guys is that there's nothing really natural about meditating, if you haven't noticed. And it's very normal to not be excited to do it. And what I found is the reason why it's not normal to be excited to do it is because our minds are generally pretty lazy and they're also very guarded. And a lot of times your minds don't want you to do what you're doing. The reason why you meditate, aside from the fact that, yes, it will make you more relaxed, it will make you more innovative, undoubtedly. It will create you positive karmas, and it will free you, and depending on your motivation, you and all beings from suffering, if you are in line with the Buddhist tradition. The other thing, tactically speaking, that meditation does is that it allows you to be in control and empowered of your mind, because most of the time your mind decides what it wants to do. Okay, so most of the time it's hard to decide and say, you know what, I don't want to address this right now, we're going to talk about it later, when it's something that you would like to address. I'm not talking about the things you don't want to deal with. Those you guys are doing just fine, I'm sure. And those are the things that probably at some point will come up in your meditation where you're like, I don't want to deal with this. But it's not a natural thing to want to meditate. It's total, and it's not a natural thing to want to, I don't know, like be good to yourself for some reason. I don't know why. I haven't actually thought about that one, and I'll probably think about that one now that I've just opened my mouth and said it. So if you are having weeks or days where the sits are sucky or you don't want to do it, that's okay. That's totally normal. So at least feel comfort in that. But also realize that it's a long game that we're in. Okay, it's not a short game here. It's a long haul, and it's important that you do a daily practice. And you know what? There are times where you do get agitated and you just can't do it, and you're better off not sitting, and that's okay. Do something else that has the same type of spirit. Okay, it could be reading something that feels like it's has to do with something that will create more virtue for you. So it could be a Dharma text, it could be scriptures, it could be a YouTube video of your favorite teacher. I mean, it could be so many different things. It could just be doing seva, which means you're doing something for somebody else. Like you wake up and you're like, this is just not working. I should do something to help somebody else instead. Go clean the toilet, that no one wants to do in your apartment. Do something like that. You're better off doing something like that than trying to sit there and just hate what you're doing and being like, this sucks, and just dozing off half the time. Okay. So, but also realize that when you do have moments, and it's consecutive moments where you don't want to sit and you're resisting sitting, take a look at why you're resisting, because most likely there's something right behind that door that you need to look at, that your mind is saying, I don't want to look at, and I'm really not interested. And I'd rather just be agitated or dull all the time. Okay. Because waking up, although it's invigorating when it happens, up to that point, when you hit that glass ceiling, it's actually very painful. It is painful because you're starting to take a sense of accountability, and you start to realize that shit, like my life has really happened, and I've done the things I've done, and I felt the things I've had because it's me. Like she didn't do that to me. He didn't do that to me. I did it to myself. And so it's not, and I say that, and like there's an intellectual understanding of it, but there's also a very real visceral understanding when you wake up and you think, oh my God, that relationship I was in 5 years ago with that guy that was just so terrible, it wasn't him. He wasn't that terrible. It was me. It's like a Fight Club moment, you know, where you look at the screen and you're like, where's the other person? You know, you look at the monitor and you're like, where's the other guy? There was no other guy. It was you just being a bitch to yourself and everyone else because you thought that there was another guy. And so when you start to realize that, and it will have moments where you just feel sick, you're like, this is really bad. I don't know how. That's what happens. And so it's not something that is, you know, yes, you'll reap the benefits and you have these highlighted moments that are good days or good practices or good weeks. And we'll have moments where you slip back and it's like, you know, one step forward, it feels like 10 steps back. It will feel that way. But at some point, as you start to do it, it's just like working out and losing weight. Like when you lose weight, how does it normally happen? You don't notice a pound by pound. But when you hit the 5 pound mark, the 10 pound, it's like one day you wake up and you're like, what? I just lost 10 pounds. How did that happen? Right. And so it's that constant daily practice that gets in that discipline where you wake up and you're like, it feels like when that happens, when you drop that weight, it just happened like that. But you know the grind that you are in, you know, it's the same thing. Okay. So just take comfort in that. So I just wanted to note that if some of you are feeling discouraged and you're like, this sucks, I know, I'm there with you. I have my days too. It does. There are a lot of days that it sucks, but there are also so much that you get out of it. And you hear people talk about all the time, like it's changed my life and so many things that you know, you hear that and you wonder like, when does that happen to me? And if it's not happening to you and you've been sitting for a while and you're hitting some sort of plateau, something has to change because that plateau can't be there too long. That means something is becoming dull. You should feel like there's a sense of, yes, it's hard. You hit a good note. It's a little bit of a plateau, but you have to keep climbing. Okay. So if you're in a place in your own meditation where it's kind of like business as usual and it's not having a little bit of like heat to it, let's light some fires and figure out where we need to start tweaking, because it should feel like you know, you should have moments where you feel like you just got your ass handed to you. That's a good thing. That's a thing because that means you have a breakthrough and you've done the work. It should not feel like, oh, I feel so relaxed. I mean, you know, how many of you know people have gone into retreats? They come out and the first thing every retreatant says is how incredibly exhausted they are, you know, because they spent every day working on long sessions of digging through all this junk that was in their mind for so long that they had, it's like a gut reno, you know, like how many of you guys like spring cleaning? How many of you guys even do it? You know, like I just stopped. I can't even do it anymore. I'm like, forget it. I just, you know what I mean? Like how many of you guys take the time to do that? Imagine all the years you've lived on in this lifetime where you haven't really done a deep clean of your mind. Like you think that's going to be easy? You know, try scrubbing a toilet that hasn't been scrubbed for 25, 35, 45, 55 years. You know, so just keep that in mind. Does that just discourage everybody? They're just like, oh my God, my toilet hasn't been cleaned for 37. I don't mean it to discourage you, but I do mean it so that you realize the rawness of it and the reality of it. It is hard. It's a big task that you're taking upon yourself. But what's actually worse, I find, is when you haven't done that work and you see other people who have progressed in their life and they're, you know, at the end of life and never even consider that, and that they think the world works in this weird, like manipulative, totally messed up way, and that's it. And they work in that dynamic and they don't understand why they're dying alone so miserable. You know, that's worse, where you just can't imagine people, you know, where you see people where they just think only about themselves and that's it. And that's how they've managed to live their life, and they've created their defense mechanisms to feed that ego because that's the only way they could survive. That's actually more sad. You know, like have compassion for that and realize that you have the choice today, and every day you wake up and every night before you go to bed to change that narrative for yourself. Okay, so meditation, a big part of it is to gain control of your mind so that when you have these moments and you're aggravated or agitated or frustrated or upset, or like just like your mind can't get off of feeling anxious because you have so many things that you need to do or attend to, or you're totally freaked out and scared, that's your mind taking control of you. And you can actually change that. So when you have those upheavals of like, I'm really scared, I don't understand what I'm doing here right now. Why am I here? What's going on? How do I change my life? This totally sucks. This relationship sucks. This job sucks. My apartment sucks. All these things suck, right? That, yes, there's the tactical way of changing that, but there's also something that happens in your mind that will shift it to make it so much easier for you, where it's not like a huge schlep. You're not having to like work so hard to make changes. Does that make sense? Because sometimes it feels that way. It's like it's so tough, and it doesn't need to be. And that it changes because the way your mind shifts. That's all it is. You just shift it slightly, and it's a whole different landscape. Okay. All right. Enough of that. Here we go. Can you say Nepa Nang? Again, Nepa Na. So Nepa is problem, and Nya is 5. So this is 5 problems. So we're going to talk about the 5 problems that arise in meditation. We're trying a different font today to see if it is more legible. Is it helping? I know, it's why I like the condensed, but they're having problems with video. So we're make it a little fatter and gray. I'm trying to find ways to spruce it up, but yeah. So in the scriptures, it says, basically, it's good to know your enemies before you meet them. So that's what we're going to be looking at, your 5 enemies. Okay. Okay, can you say Nyepa Gi? Again, Nyepa Gi. So Nyepa is, here in this situation is antidote, and Gi is 8. So the Nyepa Gi is the 8 corrections, or the 8 antidotes to the 5 problems that we're going to look at. Okay. So here we go. 5 problems. The first one. Can we say Lelo? Again, Lelo. Okay. Lelo is laziness. How many of you have experience with that? I was just asking. We just hired a new associate planner in our team, and I was like, "What's your vice?" And I'm sitting there drinking coffee, like pounds of coffee. I've been just, it's the thing this week anyway. And I said, "What's your vice?" She's like, "Laziness." I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting, huh?" Yeah, she's like, "I just don't do anything." It's like, that's my vice. I thought it was funny. I'm like, alcohol, huh? Yeah, I just hired her, and I was like, she's like, "But unless I have something to do," and I was like, yeah, it's funny. Like, that's your thing that you fight against. But it was good. She could have been like drugs, and I'm like, oh. Like, okay. So Lelo is laziness. It's also something that's more subtle. It's not like an obvious, like, I don't want to do anything. It's that subtle laziness. It's that feeling when you get up and you're like, I don't want to meditate. I don't want to do it now. I'll do it later. Maybe I'll do it tonight. I'll definitely do it tonight. Yeah, I'll totally do it tonight. I like promise I'll do it tonight. And then so now you're like, I'm so like, today's been such a no, it's just too, I can't, too much. I have to go to sleep, passing out. That's what Lelo is. Okay. It's not having the motivation to meditate, which is interesting because when you work, right, you have the motivation to go to work because you think that if you go to work, you'll get what? Paid, right? Like, I have to go to work, so I get paid. That's else how am I going to get paid? So you have this motivation. With meditation, it's trickier because there is no extra, zeros in your bank account, right? So it takes a little bit more work. It's like, why am I going to do it? I know it's good for me, but like, really, you know? So that dialogue you have, that's what lay low is. Okay. And there's 4 antidotes to it that we're going to talk about. The first one, can you say, Ting Nen Zin La Depa? Again, Ting Nen Zin La Depa. So Ting Nen Zin is one pointed focus, and La Depa is towards faith. It's basically the ability to keep your mind on one object. So when you hear like single pointed focus, it's not like a point, like it's not like a pixel. That's not what your focus is. It's the area of the object. It's the general. So like when we say focus on your breath, that's why I'm making it a point to not focus on your nostrils or that point. It's the area, it's your body in the somatic field of the breath. Okay. So whenever you hear one pointed, just note that it's not necessarily like a specific point. Yeah, like I don't know, pixel is what comes to my mind. So it's having the faith. So this antidote, when you have these moments of laziness and you're like, I don't want to do anything. One antidote, one way to correct it is by thinking about the faith that you have. Now, this is a little tricky because if you're in this practice at this moment and you're like, I'm kind of Buddhist-ish in the sense that I'm here, but I'm not really Buddhist-ish because I'm not like, oh, I'm into all these deities and I'm a Malavi and I have taken vows. That's okay. It's really about understanding, having the faith that meditating is going to move you in the direction that you want to go. Okay, it's going to somehow settle your mind. It could be anything from, it will create clarity for me, it will relax me, it will create less anxiety, but there's some sort of faith that by doing this is somehow going to help me. You have to have that, or it's impossible to even like be on the cushion, right? I mean, unless you're like, someone made me do it, which if they did, you should be really, really grateful to them. Jee made me do it. Okay, be grateful. It's also something that you need to have if you want to move through the 5 paths of Buddhahood that we talked about. There's 5 steps that we talked about in the past. There's, which are accumulation, preparation, seeing, habituation, and no more learning. You have to have a sense of knowing that in order to move through those 5 paths, that you need to have this quality of having faith that by meditating is the only way in which you can move through the path. So for those of you who are subscribing, have taken full refuge vows, for one, right? You're in a place where you're saying, yes, if I want to move through my 5 paths of being able to somehow reach Buddhahood, or even before that, have the direct perception of emptiness, right? That I have to have faith that by meditating is the only way I'm going to do it. Does that make sense? That makes pretty good sense, right? It's also said that in order to have actually good morality, the only way to do it is by meditating as well. But figure out for yourself what it is that's motivating you. If you haven't already, try to articulate what that is. And I would even recommend that you write it down. Like, what is it specifically at this time in your life that motivates you to want to meditate? You know, because it must be something that's about doing something better for yourself, right? Right? So whatever that is for you, remind yourself what that is. And so when you have those moments where you just don't want to do it, bring that back and recall that back. Like, I'm doing this because the last 3 months of my job have been really, really difficult and I need to figure it out and I don't know what to do. And so I believe somewhere that perhaps being on the cushion is going to help me figure that out, right? or I'm really afraid of dying, you know, and I've been seeing a lot of death happening, and it's totally flipping me out, you know. It's that motivation that you need to think about to have to get you on that cushion. So try to articulate what that is and have faith in that. And so get up and get set. And if it's 5 minutes, you can do 5 minutes, you know, and it will inspire you to do 7. And then it will inspire you to do 9, which is what you're going to do this week. Right? Okay. It's also something to even consider while you're on the cushion. You know, when you have moments where you're like, this sucks. This is a good place to start. Okay. All right. The second one, Dunpa. Again, Dunpa. This is, you have to want it.
This is the second hand.
Yes, it's a second antidote. So there has to be a hunger, right? Of, I want this. I want this to happen. I think the first antidote very much has a sense and a flavor of renunciation that needs to happen. If you don't know what renunciation is, I would recommend highly to get as intimate as you can with what that means to you. Okay, that's important, because renunciation is a sense of not just like I don't want to, the way the world is working isn't working for me, and there has to be another way. And it's not just that, it's a sense of surrender. It's realizing that. So if you haven't gotten that, that's also something that I would absolutely consider for those of you who have decided to take this as part of your practice. What does that mean? How does that go deeper, you know? And where are you tested? You know, and that's a wonderful thing about having a teacher, because your teachers will teach you that in whatever shape or form that they do it, you know. Okay, so that's another part. Dunpa is very much of, you have to want it. So, you know, the first one is knowing that there's something that's coming out of it, right? There's a faith that you believe there's something good about it. The next one is just wanting it. There's a hunger for it, right? If you don't have that, then you're already like, that's not going to motivate you. So the second one is to think about that. Do you want it bad enough? And what is it exactly that you want? Do you want to change the way you think badly enough? You know, do you want to have a different worldview that could, from what everyone is saying, when I say everyone, I guess it's really me, but from what I'm saying and what other practitioners will say is, do you want to change your mindset badly enough to be able to free yourself from suffering? Is that of interest to you? And if that's not, then you're not going to be motivated, right? So to some degree, you're all here because there is some sort of inclination to that. So bring that up again, and that heat, you know, and that like hunger of wanting it. Okay.
Kind of like, I liken it to performing.
Yeah.
How you kind of psych yourself up before you start.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just enough to know what you're going to meditate on.
Totally.
It's like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really gotta like, I'm gonna nail this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Get yourself fired up.
Totally.
Because it really helps.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, how many of you guys watched the marathon on Sunday? None of you. Wow. Really? Wow. It's like such an epic New York thing. And I'm like, I thought everyone's like, ah. Okay. So, okay. So when you, at least, okay, for those of you who have, and those of you who haven't, just imagine. But like, first of all, I think marathon running is like the most painful thing I could possibly imagine for me. I like really hate walking, so like running that much, and I see people walking, I'm like, that's so many miles, I can't imagine. But that drive and the training, and it's interesting because when you watch the marathon runners and you see the crowds, you can see the people who've trained. You know, they do it effortlessly. It's like phenomenal. They like don't even. It's like their body is one breath that you're just seeing manifested in the physical form. There's like nothing. They aren't breaking a sweat. It's like amazing. And then you see people who haven't trained as much and their heads are flailing. They're just like, whatever. And their clothes, it's like clearly not prepped, right? They're like wearing cotton and it's like raining outside. And so, but regardless of wherever they're at in their discipline, there was a level of how much they wanted it. Like they've trained and they've decided, right, that they're going to finish this race no matter what. Okay, so it's that same idea. Yeah, it's like you have to want it, you know. And you know, in all honesty, like on those days you wake up and you're like, oh, it's so cold outside and it's so dark and now it's daylight savings, and you know, and you don't want to roll out of bed. It's hard to reinvigorate that, but it's the sense of like, yeah, I know this is good for me, and then it's like, how do I inspire myself to want it? And it's like, oh God, last week was so bad and I'm like really not looking forward to going to work today. Like, how am I gonna make this better? It's like maybe this is gonna help. It could even be something like that. It's like maybe this is gonna help. And I want my job or I want my life to be so much better. That I know, right? That I know. So does that motivate me to then get up and sit on my cushion? Okay, like that. Number C, the third one is sundru. Can you say sundru?
Sundru.
Again, sundru.
Sundru.
And that is effort. It's also the name of the fourth perfection. Do you remember what the fourth perfection is? Joyful effort. So this is without the joy, just so you know, but it has the effort. There's not much joy here at the antidote. It's just put in the effort, damn it. That's it. I mean, that's really it.
Is the Tibetan the same?
The Tibetan, I don't know if it's the same. I just know that the translation is definitely effort, but I don't know if the Tibetan is the same. I know it's just without the joy. I feel like the Tibetan is actually, huh? Yeah. I don't know if the Tibetan is the same. We could find out. I'd be curious. I feel like it's the same from what it sounds like. It's the effort. Another thing I'll note about effort is, you know, the times you really don't want to do it. My teachers have always said this. That's the times that you need to do it the most. Okay? When there's resistance, there's a reason there's resistance. And you're not going to be able to see that reason unless you do your sit. Because there's a reason why you don't. Like, you go through the process, right? You're like, wake up and you're like, I really don't want to I don't want to sit. I don't have time to sit. I'll do it tonight. No, you know you're not going to do it tonight. I'm going to sit. Okay. But I don't know, maybe. And then you're like, but I really need to change the way my life is because this is just not cutting it out for me. So I know sitting is going to help. Okay, I'm gonna get up and try to do a meditation. No, and you have all these reasons, right? And when you have that next phase where you're just like, I just don't want to do it. I just don't. I'm going to be good to myself today. And I'm just going to sleep in, right? Whatever excuses you have. When there's clearly resistance for you to get up and to sit and you're butting up against that, that is going to be one of your best meditations. Okay. How many of you practice yoga or have gone to yoga? Okay. How many of you have gone to yoga on the days you really don't want to go? And how many times have you walked out and you're like, wow, that was really good? How many of you have regretted going, right, on days that you didn't want to go?
There's sometimes where I'm like, dude, I was too tired to push myself.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. That's a whole different thing. Yeah, which you shouldn't do. You should have, and that's a whole different thing. But assuming the fact that you're not pushing yourself, right, and you know how to moderate that, rarely you'll come out of a yoga class, or even let's just even say for those of you who are gym rats, like for you working out or like go on a run, rarely you'll come out and be like, that sucked, and that's why I didn't want to go. Like that was a total waste of my time. Okay. Usually you'll walk out and be like, that was actually exactly what I needed. and exactly why I didn't want to go, because it was more painful in ways that I wasn't interested in really engaging, but it loosened me up, you know? So that's what effort is. So when you have that kind of resistance, that's really, really good, because that tells you there's a block there and it's so clear and you feel it, and it becomes almost visceral, that it tells you that you can move right through that, right? It's one thing when you don't even know how to, like, you're like, oh, this is easy, no problem. Like, that's a little hard. When there's a block, that's a good thing. Then you're like, ah, this is something I need to do. There's more reason why I should do it. What's happening? Okay. Okay. Last one. Can you say Xinjiang? Again, Xinjiang? Xinjiang is practiced ease. Yeah, it's an antidote. Although it feels like it's like a byproduct. What it basically means is that you can force the mind to do something over and over again. It's repetition. You can actually force it to have a practice with ease. You can train your mind to do anything. It's just whether or not you're willing to do it. There are no parameters. The only parameters you have are the ones that you've created in your own mind. You know? So if you're thinking one way or thinking another way, Xinjiang means basically that you can correct laziness altogether. That's the last one, which is interesting to consider. Like, how do you correct? We can actually train yourself to not be lazy. Okay. So the idea is that the first three, as you can see, kind of lead one to another, to another, to this one. It's a constant repetition and consistency that will get you to a place where this is the last one. The other thing too is that at some point when you meditate, well, no, let me rephrase that. Every time you meditate, you should finish it to the best of your ability where it feels good. Because if it's not feeling good, you know, you're probably less motivated to come back and doing it again, right? Like, that was bad. And next day you're like, that was even worse. I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do it, right? It's the same thing with like any yoga class you've been to or anything like that, you know. So you want to try to make sure you leave it on a good note. If you're doing longer sits and it's just grueling, just stop. Like, don't end it when it's grueling, you know. And you might have different practices that you need to consider to make sure that it has a sweetness to it, but try to end it in a place where whatever that is for you. Like, for me, a good meditation that I end is, there is a sense of for like the cocktail combination for me is, it has to feel like there was focus that was consistent. And even if it was muddy, but then it's like, okay, I'm going to do the last 5-minute sprint, you know, and I'm like, 5 minutes, Jee, we're going to do this. 5 minutes, you're going to stay focused on your object. And even if I finish on that note, that's fine. Even if the first 20 minutes were just crappy and I'm all over, I'm flailing all over the place, you know, it's that last bit that I'll focus on just to wrap it up to the best of the ability and see what happens, you know. So find out what that is for you, you know, where it feels good for you. Sometimes there'll be moments where I will have to end my meditations doing like a much longer dedication to open up my heart. Like, there are things like that I'll do just to end it on like a nice, like, it was a grueling, you know, cathartic, intense sit. And, you know, I'm sitting there and it's emotional and I'm hot and I'm sweating and crying and all this stuff is happening and it's good and it's difficult. And then I'll need to end it with just a more like a warm dedication, because it was a grueling 25 minutes. Does that make sense? So you'll know what's right for you, but try to end it on a sweet note or a note that feels like, yeah, I feel satisfied. It was worth it. Okay. All right. Let's take a break and then we'll go on to the second one. We'll take like a 10-ish minute break.
So the first
Oh,
four
yes.
antidotes are just for the first.
For the first
problem?
one, for laziness, for lay low. That's right. Yes.
You're my two homeworks.
Oh, yay. Thank you.
I misunderstood. I didn't know we were supposed to write individually the meditations. Instead, I've been writing like the positive thing, the negative thing, and the rectification. But from now on, I'll
Yeah,
start also
great.
writing
Perfect.
meditations.
Wonderful. That sounds good. Thank you. Here we go. Number 2. Can you say namgak? Jepa. Namgak? Oh, sorry, damgak. That was my like dyslexia, weird MN switch. Jepa. One more time. Damgak? Jepa. Okay, thank you. You're like, huh? Namgak? Here we go. Okay. So, damgak is instruction and jepa is advice to forget. So the second, usually the second problem that, or the obstacle that you'll face, or one of the second obstacles that you'll face, will be forgetting the instructions. Like, what? Yeah. You're like, it's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What are we talking about? So it really means losing the object of meditation, right? It's not, I mean, it could be, like, I have no idea what we're supposed to be focusing on. That could be one of them. But in this specific one, it's really like you know what the topic is, you've just lost it. Like it just slipped away.
Is it like you catch a thought and you start thinking?
Yeah, usually it's that your mind wanders. Yeah. Where you're like, okay, breath. Oh, then it's like, oh, I have a wedding next week. What am I going to wear? Oh no, I have to go buy, it's like that. And then suddenly like, you don't even know how much time has passed. Like, I think that was only a couple minutes, and then your bell goes off and you're like, oh no, that was probably a majority of my time. Or at least for me, my mind wanders and has no idea that it's wandering until very end, once I've exhausted the narrative. And then I'm like, oh my God, like, what have I been doing the whole time? And sometimes it'll be like this storyline and then it goes to this, and and before I know it, it's like, it's once I've fatigued myself of like, oh, I'm done. I know what I'm going to wear now. And I'm like, oh no, that's totally not what the point of my meditation was supposed to be about. Shit. Like, that's usually how it goes for me. Or I'm like, oh no. And then it's like, do I start over? No, I'll just finish up. And I'm like, I have 2 minutes left. And I'm like, oh, it's like that. So that's what this is. It starts to kind of deviate away. It slips away. Okay. The antidote is drenpa. Okay, it's remembering. I mean, clearly, right? So, so this one isn't just remembering, but it's actually remembering before you even begin to lose the object. So, do you remember last class we did the 5 minutes, right? And then we stopped, and all of you guys were like, "Oh, my mind was all over the place," but you knew what it was, and then you sat and did it again, and it was easier because you knew what you're going to expect. Like you knew the thief that was going to come and rob you. Right? You've identified the thief. You knew what the thief looked like. You understood when it comes in. So you were ready before and you decided this time I'm locking my door rather than leaving my door open and being like, hello, thief, come in, right? So, and we'll actually do meditations that practice this. It's called we talk about it as in the framework of kidnapping. Like, it's like, it's like, I mean, I've never been kidnapped, but when you see in the movies, right, when one gets kidnapped, right, they come and they have the chlorophyll, right, and they pass you out, and before you know it, you're knocked out and inside of a trunk. The idea here is that you, in some ways, you find yourself in the trunk a lot of the times, but then you start to realize what the kidnapper looks like. And so it gets to the point where you're like, I know what the kidnapper looks like. And for a while, it's like, I know what the kidnapper looks like. And oh no, I woke up in the trunk again. How did it happen? But at least you're like, I know I've been kidnapped. Like, do it again, And so then you actually do a practice where you're like, I know, oh, I see the kidnapper. I see it. I'm not. And there will be times where you're like, I'm halfway in the trunk. I'm kind of not. Like, that's what happens. And you get trained enough where you know when it's coming. And when you see the kidnapper coming, you already are aware. You know what you're not supposed to be doing. That's not your focus. And you know how to deviate away from the kidnapper. I mean, that's really the practice. I mean, that's literally it. Yeah.
Is this
Either one.
Oh, is this the same training as like when you're about to get angry at somebody or you feel emotional about something and then you can catch yourself before you actually do it? It's kind of the same thing. Because I feel like what I've been doing with
Yeah.
meditation is
Yeah.
remembering it not fading away, but that's helped me not get angry and choose a different path before it happens. It's kind of
It is
feel like
similar. I think it'd be fair to say it's a similar muscle, but it's a different object, right? Unless your object, right? Because here you have a very specific object you have in mind, right? And then you slip away, and before you know it, it's a whole different thing. When you get angry, it would be, I suppose, similar if you know your object, your point, your focus is to not get angry, right? And so you know when, but it is similar. Like you know when the upheaval happens, you know when you start to lose your patience, right? And you know, like it, and it happens over time, right? At some point, it takes you maybe a month, you know, to realize like you were a total jackass, and then it'd be a week, and then a day, and then it starts to get shorter, right? Until to the point where, but when it before it happens, you can stop yourself instead of just losing it. Yeah, sure, similar, yeah. The more in tune you are with knowing the different type of kind of bombs that are out there for you, because each one of you have very unique and special buttons that we can all push, right? When you know what those are, or you know who your kidnappers look like and what they, you know, and how they deceive, and you're like, oh, I see you, you know, it helps you train in advance so that you're not training to be kidnapped and waking up every time. Like that's pointless, you know. The point of it is to stay focused on your object, not to get hijacked, right? So, and that kidnapper, you know, there are these thoughts that come up, but that's also your mind playing with you and messing with you. It's a part of your mind that's saying, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you don't stay on your object, because there's something that you're trying to do and get to that means that I'm going away. And that is a part of your mind that gets very scared and doesn't like it, and it will freak out. And there are times where as your practice intensifies, that will also intensify, you know. And there are things that will start to come up, and it's like and I see great practitioners, as their meditation intensifies, the things that come up, like the upheavals that come up in their life, are just far, like they're so big, but they can just, like, it's just like being in a storm, they just ride above it, it doesn't even faze them. It's fascinating, you know. And there's just things that happen, and physically that will happen, like hives breaking out and crazy stuff. Yes.
Are you talking about the upheavals that happen in their meditation, or like literally something happens in their life?
When I'm talking about upheavals at this moment, I'm talking about it in meditation. But I'm also talking, but right now, just talking about people that have things that come up, it also happens in their life. You know, it's not uncommon that the closer, when you start to engage in a spiritual, I mean, like, listen, in this practice, we believe in ghosts, right? Like, we believe in multiple realms and ghosts. Do not kid yourself and think, and this is just coming strictly from a Tibetan Buddhist perspective, but don't kid yourself and think that, you know, when you're trying to be more virtuous, there aren't other spirits out there that are very enticed by your goodness and are very interested in seeing you fail. You know, that's a reality that we believe in. Aside from that, there's also the discipline of your mind, and there's a part of your ego that is very uninterested and actually completely freaked out with the idea that you're going to be in control of that, that it doesn't have a place and a foothold in your world. So when you start to do more virtue, yeah, it's true, upheavals will happen in your life. You will see things rising up. That happens. There's tests that happen all the time, you know. And the question is, how do you navigate around that? I mean, it's very, I mean, I've been fortunate, but it's very common, like when people go into retreats, you know, on their way into retreats, like the craziest stuff happens all the time. I mean, I've heard so many car accidents, deaths that are happening around them. You know what I mean? It's like right as they go in, or, you know, it's like they just like they're so close, like, you know, 20 minutes away, 15 minutes away, and then they just totally get rammed in by another car and they can't go into retreat. You know, that's not, it's not like a accident or a coincidence. There's things that are happening in your world that are very interested and invested in making sure that you're not succeeding. And that also includes you, by the way, like the other side of you, you know. So just please know that that it's normal to feel that kind of like resistance, you know. And sometimes it feels like the world for a moment like is against you a bit, you know. But it's also interesting to see like when you have those upheavals that happen because your practice is starting to move in a certain way, when, you know, are those usually when those upheavals happen, it doesn't seem like they affect you in that same way. And it actually feels like, as much as there might be negative things that may appear like it's happening, because it's also your karma's ripening and flushing. It's like cleaning out. Like that's a good thing too. It's good that when you see good things happening and bad things kind of flushing out and ripening, that's your negative karmas also, just like you want that to go. You know, you want those to ripen and to be done so that you can move on to your other karmas that you have. So there is a purification that happens too. You know, that's why you hear people like have these stories of being in retreats and, you know, crazy stuff happening, because there's purifications that also happen too at the same time. Yeah. Okay. Number 3, can you say chingu? Again, chingu. That's mental dullness and agitation.
There was only one antidote.
Yeah, there's only one antidote for number 2. So mental dullness and agitation is, we're going to go into a little deeper. Dullness for sure is considered probably the biggest problem for most of us, and probably the biggest enemy. Agitation is also problematic, but it's a little easier to see. Dullness, there are many times where you're like, oh, I'm totally cruising, and you're actually just really dull or subtly dull. And so the scary part about subtle dullness, or, and we'll talk about the different kinds of dullness, is that you've habituated yourself or convinced yourself or believe that you're having a great meditation when in fact you're just practicing a sense of subtle dullness. Okay. So kinds of dullness. The first one is called necha. You don't need to repeat after me, but this is something for homework. There's necha, there's selcha, and then there's garcha. So necha is the fixation, selcha is a fixation with clarity, and garcha is fixation with clarity and intensity.
Is there kinds of
They're like different kinds of dullness. Yeah, I think so. Wait, let me think about it. Yeah, they're different kinds of dullness.
what would be not dullness then? Because like fixation sounds like
Oh, that's right. It's a different. Wait. Sorry. Let me think. There are different aspects of dullness. Let's walk through it and then see if maybe I titled the card wrong. A fixation is a dullness. Oh, no. They're okay. So let's go through it. A fixation, a necha, is a dullness. When you have an obvious dullness, there's a fixation that can happen. So an obvious dullness is when you have a fixation on an object, right? So an obvious dullness, it's okay. So yeah, so this is good. Okay. So an obvious dullness is you're totally fixed on the object. I'm supposed to be focusing on my cup. I'm completely focused on the object. but I have no clarity. That's what a nature would be. You have a fixation. It doesn't mean that you've lost the focus. Dullness isn't losing the focus. You have the focus. You haven't forgotten you haven't lost motivation. Like you're on your cushion, right? So you've done number one. Number two is that you went through and you realize why you're here, what motivates you. You know what the object is. You haven't, it hasn't slipped away. The object hasn't slipped away. Like, you know, it's the cup. You're focused on the cup. You have complete fixation on the cup, but you have no clarity. It's not bright, right? That's a type of dullness. That's why it's so freaky, because you actually think that you're totally meditating and you're not, you're dull. Just because you have the eye. So the way they talk about it as an example is it's like holding a cup. So the fact that I'm holding a cup is like fixation. I'm holding it. I'm fixated. I get it. But I can hold it tightly or I can hold it loosely. But I'm holding the cup, right? So if I were to like the cup, the fact that I'm even holding the cup is my fixation. If I decide to hold it loosely, that's my fixation with some sort of clarity. If I hold it tightly, right, that's fixation with clarity and intensity. Intensity is a more developed type of clarity. That's where you get intensity. Does that make sense?
Say it again.
Intensity is a deeper, intensity is a greater degree of clarity. And when you have clarity, it doesn't mean that the object is clear, right? It doesn't mean that the object is more in focus. That's not the clarity. The clarity is the meditator. It's not like, oh, I'm fixated, like, you know, I'm thinking about the cup. I'm thinking about the cup. I'm fixating on the cup. Oh, it's becoming more focused and clear. That's not what clarity is, right? Clarity is a level of brightness that you have. And I don't know how to speak about brightness. There's a freshness to it. There's please, yeah.
Like when I feel that I'm in a meditation and something is clear, it has a similar like flavor and an experience with it that is akin to when I'm awake, except that, or akin when I'm not in meditation. So I don't know if it's that, but I can be in meditation sometimes, engaging with like a tonglen or an object or something, and it feels like there's emotion and like I see it in my mind in an almost similar way that I would if I were not in meditation.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's clear, but that's something that
It's not a memory. Clarity is like it's a alertness, right? It's like when you have a clear sense of what you're doing, like it's like, okay, I'm
like there's nothing else around it.
yeah, there is like nothing else around it. Yeah, sure, that's nice. There's a brightness to it. It's not like dull and gray. There's like it feels like there's a clearness to it, a brightness to it. When we talk about doing shamatha, like sometimes I'll say things like, think of like there's just light that comes in. There's a freshness to it, you know? That's what it feels like. And so when you have garcha, which is a fixation with clarity and intensity, that's when there's this extra part where it's so clear and it's a deeper clarity that creates a level of intensity. An example between fixation and clarity versus fixation and clarity and intensity is the example that Geshe Michael gave in his teaching was when you meet a lama for the first, or when you meet your lama, like your teacher that you've meant to have, there's something where there's a fixation, like I know that's my teacher. There's a clarity, like I know what they represent, but the intensity is this drawing sense that comes from you, like you're just connected, you know. I mean, it happens too with in relationships. You just feel this pull, this gravitational pull, you know. There's an intensity to it, but the intensity comes from the clarity of knowing who that person is and why they exist for you. It doesn't just come because you're like, oh, you're in focus, you're in extra focus, and now you're intense. It's not like that. Okay. That's a different, no. So yeah, so I guess kinds of dullness is a weird way to think of it. Necha is no, I guess Garcha is not technically a kind of dullness. The first two would be subtle, like they're subtle dullnesses. Actually, Necha is definitely a gross dullness. Selcha, the second one, is a subtle dullness. And Garcha, there is no dullness there. Yeah.
The other two are kind of like you're kind of on track.
Yeah, you're kind, yeah. Yeah. The two are kind of different flavors of it.
So I guess if you had no dullness at all and no agitation at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you would be able to have complete fixation, a clarity, and as well as an intensity.
So
And you,
then, if that's what you're saying, because now I'm kind of like hooked on this idea that maybe these three are kinds of dullness. If you're saying the third one's not a type of dullness,
mm-hmm.
then you're saying that the third one would be the definition for meditation, for concentration.
I think that the third one we could say is a flavor of how your meditation should feel when you're not dull.
It's like levels of dullness.
Yeah, they're kind of like levels. It's like it's either gross, subtle, and then it's when you're not. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to go up or down. It's almost like the first two. Yeah, it's like the opposite. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel that's the first one, the lowest
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. It's almost like it needs to be flipped. Yeah. You would want to be able to have a meditation where you have full concentration and fixation, or vigilance is a word that we've used in the past, on the object with clarity. And you can't have fixation if you don't, like, you can't have vigilance, right? You can't have you can't have clarity, intensity without having an object. Like, there's just no way. That doesn't make sense. But yeah, ideally that's what you want. When you meditate,
Well, you could without it being the object of meditation.
you could what?
You could have clarity and intensity on something that's not the object of meditation.
No, it shouldn't be the object of meditation. It's a quality of the meditation.
But I'm saying, like, I could have clarity and intensity about the
Oh, in
thing I'm
general.
distracted about. in my
Totally.
meditation,
Yes, that's
But
correct.
it doesn't mean I'm meditating.
That's correct. Yeah, that's right. I mean, you are meditating. You're probably doing a really good job. You're like, remember, oh, I remember that direction. Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. Number 3. Oh, I went back to number 3. Sorry. This is just my own slide. I just want, so we just did dullness. I just want to talk about agitation for a second. So agitation is really, it's your mind wandering. It's, and so a couple of things to consider when you have agitation. You usually are agitated and attracted to things that, well, the things that agitate you are actually things that you may be attracted to. In fact, most likely are things you're attracted to. When I mean attraction, it doesn't mean like a positive attraction. It could also be something that's negative, but it pushes your button and there's an attraction there, right? Another thing just to consider for people that have agitation in your meditation, if you ever feel that, make sure you're taking care of your body. and resting. A lot of the times agitation can also come from just not eating properly, not sleeping properly. I mean, it's just purely like a physical thing that happens too. So just keep that in mind if you're starting to feel like aggravated and agitated on and off the cushion. Like, is there something about your diet or your, or the way you're sleeping? Like, what's going on there? And take a look, right? Because just because you're on the cushion and it's not like it's not like everything just clears, like if you were out late, and you're hungover, you're going to feel that on your cushion the next day. It doesn't just, it's not immune to it. So just take a look and see what that is. Okay. All right. Can you say shishin? Again, shishin? That's watchfulness. So this is still part of number 3. It's an antidote. Yeah. So when you have dullness and agitation, the antidote is to be watchful. It's so we've been doing that by checking in. So like we know when we do like the little 5-minute segments, at some point we'll start stitching your meditations together. So you've done 5 minutes, now you've done 7, now you've done 9. Then today we did like a 5 and a 7-minute break, right? You can also do like a 5 and a 9-minute module, like figure out what works for you. But at some point you'll do the 5 plus 9 and you'll sit for 14 or 15 minutes straight. And it's okay during your meditation to just check in and just be like, am I on my object? Have I completely changed? Am I dull? Am I agitated? Am I being too fussy with my seat? Like, what's going on, right? So the antidote to this one is to just check in and be watchful and see what's happening, evaluate it rather than just succumbing to the dullness, I think in particular, dullness is very, very tricky because I've had these things where like sometimes I'm sitting and I feel like I'm in a deeper state of meditation and it's a longer sit. And I'm kind of like tipping a little in and out of sleeping. Like I'm kind of dreaming, right? And there's this like interesting kind of dream state that happens while I'm sitting, but I feel totally alert and I feel like I'm very connected to my body and I feel like I'm feeling whatever I'm supposed to be feeling in my meditation, but I'm kind of lucid dreaming, And what's tricky about when that happens, if that ever happens to you, is that it feels magical and it feels really special. And it feels like something is happening. And sometimes you see colors or you feel things and you're like, oh my, and that's actually a form of subtle dullness. And it sucks when you realize it. Because I'm like going to teachers and I'm like, guess what happened? It's like amazing. They're like, you're subtly dull. Because you shouldn't be lucid dreaming. I'm dozing off a little bit. But I'm kind of not. But I am, it's not like there's like the gross dozing off, right? Where you're like that. But this is like borderline sleeping. It's lucid dreaming almost in a way. You're not dozing, like you're still alert and you're feeling, but you're a little doozy.
Feels like hallucinating.
A little bit. It feels a little bit like you're hallucinating.
Because for me, I
Yeah,
always
it's
feel
nice.
like
Yeah.
this discursive thought that goes on that takes you away from your object, and that's sort of brighter. But then that same thing happens. All of a sudden, I'm in a movie.
Yeah.
It's totally unrealistic.
Yeah.
It's not reality at all.
Yeah.
It's not I'm making plans for what I'm going to wear to the wedding.
Yeah.
It's I'm in the Civil War.
Yeah. Oh wow.
And it's really
I've never gone there. Okay, that's amazing.
realistic.
Yeah.
It's totally, you're in a movie.
Yeah.
It's hallucinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool.
Totally.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not helpful.
Yeah.
Ever heard of the hypnagogic state?
No, tell me.
This is what Dr. Vienoff was teaching
Mhm.
as he was teaching the stages of meditation. The hypnagogic state is that state in between like a waking state and the dream state.
Yeah.
And it's like you're not quite dreaming
Yeah.
because there's no perceiver almost. Like there's no, it's not you that's dreaming, so you're not dreaming. It's this like weird ruminating thoughts that are like hallucinations
Yeah.
happening, and,
Yeah.
and it's confusing.
Yeah.
in a way.
No, it's interesting because Doug Wienhoff is the teacher that I go to, and I'm like, guess what happened at my retreat? And he's like, oh, you were just dull the whole. I'm like, what? No, it was like all this stuff was happening. I have journal pages, journal entries, and he's like, no, go back. You know, yeah, he's exactly the person that I went to.
Yeah, he's the
Yeah.
first one that like pointed it for
Yeah.
me, and I was like, oh, it's never
Yeah.
been able to express
Yeah.
it.
It's very interesting. So just keep an eye out for it because it feels like, oh man, this is so cool. That's not good. Yeah, there's an acute way of how meditations are. It's not like a hippie to be like, this is cool, like it was awesome, I'm so relaxed, man. No, it's not. It just isn't. So when you have these moments where you're kind of like in that state, take a note of it and watch for it. And it's subtle, and it gets even more subtle. And it really is just, it's interesting how subtle it can get. But you'll see. I promise. You'll see. When you have these watchful moments, you know, and you're checking in and you're like, oh, I'm feeling dull, you know, take a look or even agitated, right? Just take a look and check and see what's happening and what your motivation is. Because you have to also remember what's very helpful in a situation like this is that you're meditating in hopes of having certain realizations, you know? So it's not to feel like it's an amazing scene or an hallucination that you're in. The point of what you're trying to do specifically is to be able to have a realization. When I say that, what I'm going to say directly is it's the direct perception of emptiness. The direct perception of emptiness is understanding how to change and shift the framework of your mind. It's changing your worldview, right? And so that practice, just ground yourself in that when you're watching and being like, what is it? Because there's these, it's like going to yoga, you know, like sometimes people go to yoga to get the yoga glow or the yoga high, they'll say. And I mean, I was recently having a conversation with some friends about exercise. And I just said earlier, like how much I hate walking. And I actually do not like walking very much. And I had friends saying, how is that possible? Like, you're so good at yoga and you do it all the time. And, you've done so, and I'm like, yoga is an exercise to me. They're like, what? I'm like, no, yoga has nothing to do with exercise for me. It's about being able to move my prana. It's about to move my energy so that I can sit longer. There's a whole practice to that for me. It's not like cardio, you know? And so it keeps my focus when I'm in a yoga class. My goal isn't to feel the yoga high, and my goal isn't to make my thighs thinner, although both of them are really nice to have. But my goal is to be able to move and open up my wings, right? And so when you're sitting and you're doing these meditations and you have these moments of dullness, watch it, but remind yourself and ground yourself why on earth you're sitting there for the first place, you know? And remember and recall that, because that's going to help you get back on course. It should, if you really understand what you're trying to do. Okay? All right. Here we go. We have 2 more to go. Do mi japa. Again, do mi japa. That's not taking action. So the 4th problem that you'll sometimes come up against is you see all these things happening, you know that you're totally dull or agitated, and guess what? You don't do anything. Okay? This is basically failing to take action. Okay? You just let it go. Okay? So the antidote is do japa. It's taking action. Obviously. So profound. Like, guess what, guys? This is what you've been waiting for. When you're not doing something, I have the answer. Just do it, right? stop and just do it. I mean, that's really like the whole self-help industry is based on this concept. You know, like billions of dollars. Oh man. Okay. So just some things that you need to know. Gross versus subtle dullness. Jinwa Rikpa would be gross dullness, and Jinwa trauma is subtle dullness for those of you that are doing homework. Just some definitions I'm throwing out there. Okay. Okay. So within the just doing it, right, there are some antidotes that we have for dullness antidotes. So there are 3 different things, and they go in order. The first one is Miten La Semdream, which is to tighten your concentration of the object. So when you have these moments of dullness and you're saying, okay, I realize I've motivated myself. I'm on the cushion. I went through the whole process of number 1. I am not forgetting. I'm able to stay on the object. The object isn't slipping away. I've gotten the object. I realize that there's some sort of dullness and agitation. I've watched it. I see it. Now I'm going to do something about it. So this is what am I going to do, right? So when you have dullness, the first thing that you can do is to tighten your concentration on the object. And you know what that means, right? It's really to hone in your focus and your awareness. The second one is Shinla Yije, which is focusing on something uplifting and the benefits of what you're doing. So this is really, you know, so you're like, okay, I'm tightening my object. I still feel like I'm dull. What do I need to do next? Then, and you're getting a sense of that. Then the next thing you would do is you need to recall the benefits of why you're doing what you're doing. You know, or focus on something that's uplifting, like, I don't know, the scriptures will say like being so grateful that I'm here in this lifetime. Although that does not work for me, by the way, because I'm just like, I don't want to be here. This is so hard. I'm not going to be grateful about being here. So I'll be honest, that has not worked for me. I'd be curious if it works for you. I'm usually not trying to generate like, I'm so grateful I'm sitting here. This is so amazing, because I'm feeling dull. You know, I'm like, this is, you know, if it's like what I think is a good meditation is a subtle dullness, which I didn't even realize. And I'm like, oh man, you know, so that's a harder one for me.
It works for me.
Does it work for you?
It works
Yeah.
for me only when I compare it to like being in hell or
Yeah.
like
Sure. Mhm.
It's so bad.
Mhm. Totally. Yeah, yeah. And we'll get to that too, because there are times where you do think about that, you know, to get you out of it. Or just, yeah, it's like how lucky and joyful you are to be able to have the opportunity in a safe place with a roof over your head and all these different things that should create gratitude. Another thing that you can also do here is think of light. That helps me, like just brightness. I will even play with my eyes, where I'll open my eyes if they're fully closed. Just, and sometimes it's not like the half open, it's like full on open to just get it together, and then I can go back and close my eyes fully, or do a half open close, whatever I'm doing at the time. So it's really just trying to create generating some sort of and cultivating some sort of uplifting, like whatever can get you up. I mean, not up, but you know, emotionally aware. Another thing that also has helped is just watching where my chin is. Sometimes when I get dull, my chin goes lower, and so I kind of, you lift it up and that helps a little bit too. Okay. The third one is reship tune drool, which is at some point you're doing everything you can and it is just not going away. So just stop, take a walk, get some fresh air, stretch. You can even go into the bathroom or the sink and splash your face with cold water, but just shake it out of you, but then sit back down again. It's not like quit. That's not what I'm saying. Oh, Jee says I can just go wash my face now. And no, it's get it out of you and then sit back down. And it will usually the second time around be better than the first time. Okay. Another thing too that will happen that I'll note in dullness is sometimes you'll become dull because you're depressed. There'll be times where your dullness is a slight state or a huge state, but usually sometimes even a subtle state of depression or a mild depression that's happening, if you can pinpoint that, or a very deep depression, which makes it harder to meditate. So there is a bit where you cultivate and encourage yourself, and it takes time, but it's really rebuilding your confidence. So that's something that you can do also off the cushion. It doesn't have to be on the cushion. Like if you're meditating and your dullness is kind of it's always feeling a bit dull and a bit blah, and take a look and see if there is a mild depression that's happening, and see, and that's some work that you can do off the cushion that will make an impact on the cushion. Yes.
Someone's feeling something like that, or sadness or something, would it be also good to feel it and observe it, or not?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, but feeling it and observing it and being dull, like you can still be alert and aware and clear, right? And still not be dull. So, so by no means like should you not feel your emotions, right? I mean, you should obviously give space for the emotions that you have, understanding. I mean, within this whole context, understanding where it comes from, why it does, knowing that it will end, thank God, right? And you can be in that and feel it, sure, of course. But if you, but when you are focused on and when you're in a meditation and your object, for instance, is the space of your body, right? Then that feeling of being sad or mourning or whatever that is for you is not a place in that space. You're focused solely, like you can have time for that outside of that, if that's not your object, right? If you're doing like a tonglen or you're doing different practices where you really need to feel the pain of other people, that's different. But if it comes to if your object is my body or feeling my body and my breath, then everything else is later. Does that make sense? If you're sitting there and you can't do it, and you're having a hard time and that's impacting your practice, then there's something to take a look at. That's not, and it could be on the cushion or it can be off the cushion. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. Great. Okay. Agitation antidotes. Lupa is to mentally loosen up. So sometimes when you get agitated, it means that you may be too tight and constricted. Just take a chill pill, just relax. Loosen up on the object a little bit. And sometimes agitation doesn't have to be like aggro. It's not like that. It could be also just being really excited and happy. You're just giddy. You're like so happy. It usually happens when people are first in love, like they can't sit because they're just like hearts everywhere and they're just like so happy. And that's also kind of agitation where you have too much hyper intensity of that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be like frustration or negativity necessarily. But loosen up for sure. In the scriptures, they said that the Buddha's father didn't reach enlightenment because he couldn't do this. He couldn't loosen up. He was too restricted. So it's kind of sad. Number 2, shift to a sobering topic. So such as death or suffering. When you have agitation, one way to be able to rectify that is to think about the fact that it's just about death in general, you know, um, or about suffering in general, you know. Um, it will start to ground you. So usually agitation, because something's heightened, you're just trying to reground yourself. So it will bring you down. So you're just trying to bring down that energy, not in a negative way, but in a grounded way. Death is if you can really do that and go into an understanding what that is and what that means, that's a really nice way to kind of eliminate a lot of agitation that can happen, you know.
That's not a distraction. You just like consciously decide like, wow, I just can't stop this. I'm just gonna think of death now.
Yeah.
For a minute.
It could be. Yeah. It could be a minute. It could be for the remainder. It could be for a portion of it. You'll know when you're grounded again. And it might be for the rest of the duration. And that's it, you know. You might change your object of focus completely. Or you might do it for a little bit and then go back and see how that feels. Ideally, you'd want to do, it feels like, I mean, it depends how long your sits are, right? Ideally, if you feel agitated, you've tried to loosen up, you're still really agitated, and you just need to ground yourself, you could just go straight into a death meditation and forego the object that you have, or just consider the concept of what death means to you, see if that regrounds you, and then go back to your object again. You can do that as well.
But isn't it like problematic if your focus is so off?
In general.
No,
Oh.
that your mind is just there's just so much agitation.
Yeah.
Then if you go to meditate on death, you're not gonna really stay there for too long,
Either.
or you'll have.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Which is why
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I suspect this is an interesting one for me because I don't usually have agitation. But I'm just thinking, I suspect that if you are very agitated, you have a hard time, you think about death and understand it, and you actually think about the suffering that's out there, you know, and you really let yourself feel that you'll probably ground yourself a little bit more. You may not, I don't think it will I think depending on your understanding of death, the agitation will either completely go away or it will still be there, but it should probably subside somewhat. I'd be curious to see how that works if that's something that you're dealing with. Death is a hard thing for me too. I mean, I'll just be honest to you guys personally, because I come from a family where my first relative, my grandfather, just passed away this year. I've never had anyone die in my life. Members, I've had family friends, but distant, not super close. Who didn't want the kids to deal with death. So like my experience with death is also very new and understanding it and getting more used to the idea of it. And if you do, it's going to benefit. For me, this one was a hard one until I had a dog that passed away. That was something, but I also knew that she was going to, because I mean, hopefully, right, if all went well, she was going to die before me. And I had a feeling that was going to happen. So I prepped myself, but with my grandfather, it was like the first few minutes really in my life. So I'd be interested to see, for those of you who are agitated, if this will help. If it doesn't, please let me know. I'm curious.
Well, agitation is my biggest problem.
Yeah.
And death meditation really helps.
Yeah.
And I don't go into a death meditation, but what the hell am I having these thoughts for? Like, tomorrow's it. Like,
Yeah.
this is it.
Yeah.
Like, I may not make it home tonight.
Yeah.
Literally, it's raining. I'm driving. I may not make it home.
Yeah.
I want to pay attention.
Yeah.
And usually it's that level of urgency. Like, we all just think
Yes, question.
When I'm agitated, which happens often in my meditation, like for example, if I were to try a death meditation, my guess is that what would happen is I would think about death and then I'd be like, yeah, you're wasting your time. And like I just there's no stopping that voice. And like the only thing that works for me is just saying, okay, like I'm agitated and that's it. And then sometimes it's really peaceful 30-minute meditation where it's just constantly like me just trying not to get more agitated. And that's like the best I got.
Interesting. The third one here, if you can't do death, is going back and counting your breath.
Is it after you tried one of it?
Yeah. So you tried and you're like, I'm going to loosen up. This is not working. I'm going to think about death. Yeah, okay, fine, but that's not working. And the third one they say is to go and count on your breath. Which is interesting because we've been doing these shamatha like preliminaries. There are practices that we'll do. We'll actually start it next week where you let your mind do its thing. You just let it, right? You just let it take its course, you let it to have its thing, like, but you don't attach to it. And you just let it ride, and you just sit back and let it ride. That's not the end goal of a meditation, but it's part of the process. Because the some part of it is like you're right. There is going to be situations where there is a whole storyline that you can't change, and you can't control it, right? It just has a life of its own. So then the question is, how do you let it do its thing and just let it have its course and observe and not making judgments about it? And that's like when you start to get into more of the sweet spot of shamatha. And that to me personally is one of the best meditations I like. It's my go-to. It's like I've always talked about it with Doug. I have conversations where I'm like, I talk to him about how it feels like I'm constipated if I don't do it because it's gunky in here. And so it just lets me have a place where, and it's harder for me to do meditations that aren't about that for a long time, about watching my mind, because I'm trying to focus on something when my mind is really interested in a bunch of other stuff, right? So it's like, for me, a long time, like to focus on the Buddha is not part of my, like I can't do that. It's just not something I can do. It's very difficult, you know, and it's something that I can do more of now, but it took me a long time to get there because I had to have a place where my thoughts can exist, you know, but do it in a, I guess I can say, a healthy way, you know. And so when you do shamatha meditations where you're giving yourself permission to just let the film go and not having to control it, you know, but not engaging in it, just letting it watch, that was very helpful for me. And that also has to do with your breath. So we'll do that next week and see if that helps. Yes.
I would say a fourth one would, if you're sitting,
Yeah.
go to a laying down meditation.
Oh, and lying down.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That
Really helps. Like to just relax you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Are there names for the subtle agitations?
Mm-mm. I've never heard actually of subtle or gross agitations. It's
If
usually,
they exist.
yeah, I guess they do exist.
That's what I was trying to ask earlier.
Yeah. I've never heard of subtle agitation. I've always heard of gross dullness and subtle dullness, but not agitation.
Can I describe one?
Yes, please.
I wanted to ask about it before the break.
Yeah.
So there's definitely not clarity. I'm focused on the object,
Uh-huh.
but there's like stuff in the background. Like
Yeah.
I'm not waking up in the trunk.
Right.
And there's the between the trunk. There's like I see everything clearly and I'm completely kidnapped. And then there's all the stuff in between. It's like I'm with the breath, but there's
Stuff in the background.
yeah.
there's
And,
noise or there's images or there's things happening.
and I'm trying not to fight with the kidnapper, because that could be a problem too.
Uh-huh.
And so it happens that I have a song stuck in my head.
Uh-huh.
And I can't stop it, and if I try to force stopping it, it's just gonna get worse.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna focus on my breath with the song in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that just all I'm gonna do?
That's awesome the way you describe that.
I feel like I've gone through an entire retreat with one song in my head.
Oh my god, I think I would go crazy. I don't have songs in my head, but Armando does all the time. He like wakes up with a new tune.
Yeah.
Different song.
Every day he wakes up and he's like,
Yes.
I'm like, how do you, I don't even know that many songs.
It won't stop.
Interesting. Okay. So, so fascinating. When you are in a situation where something like, for instance, you have something in the back, you know, in the periphery somewhere, or there's noise, or there's something like a song in your head, right? And you're totally focused on your object, and you still hear that song. It's like the same thing with like noise, right? I'm sitting in an object and I can hear the rain, right? I can hear the dumpster, right? The truck going by. Like I can visualize it. Like my mind goes from object outside back here, right? That is an agitation for sure. It doesn't actually feel like an agitation though. I mean, I think it's agitation because it does agitate you that you're doing it, but and it's not a dullness. I understand that. Well, actually, let me just look back. Let me think back. The way that you would work through something like that is where you go back and use your breath again to release it. And your object at that point, I would recommend that you go back and you spend time releasing the song that's in your mind. And you don't force it. I think forcing it makes it resist and come back stronger, like you said. So if you have a song, you inhale and you exhale and just let it go. And you actually don't. And the thing about songs that gets attached, like the reason that they keep going is also there's an attachment that's happening to the song. Does that make sense? Like you know the lyrics. So it's almost like karaoke, like you're creating the karaoke of that song. So there's a sense of you have to just let that go. The song will play itself out. It's subtle, but it's almost like let it just have its thing, but don't sing along with it or don't pay attention to it. It will go on. It will leave your meditation on its own.
So it's like the agitation because there's like the thought.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like it's a part of you. Like
Yeah, it's like clean. It feels like it's cleaned on to you. Yeah, but the cleaning is happening because there's something you're doing to cling on to that song.
Yeah.
Like you're egging that, you're playing it, you're like egging it along. You know what I mean? So there's a sense of when you hear that song in your mind, how do you let it just have its course and be without egging it along? So it might be something where you are just focusing on your breath. You have this song, but the intensity of the song it will change from it being loud, like prominent, to then starting to go a little bit more quiet. And at some point, you can train yourself to actually have it go off completely. You know, there's something that I do at points when I have things like that happen where I actually say it to myself. You know, I'm like, I'll say, I know I really want to like pay attention to that, but I'm not doing that right now. I'll do it. It's almost like I'm talking to my other side of me saying, I know you really want to sing this song. I know you really want to talk about this meeting tomorrow. I know you're really interested in figuring out how much money is in your bank, whatever, right? But I will actually tell that side of me, like, we'll do it. I promise. We'll sing as much as you want. We'll talk about it as much as you want. We'll take time to do it. We're just not going to do it right now. I just need 5 minutes to just do this. And that has helped me turn that off. It's just something where I just make a commitment where I'm like, I'm just not gonna, we'll do it. And there's something about that somehow gives me a sense of being able to release that, because the urgency that I have of wanting it to take place in my space of my mind while I'm meditating is because I feel like I need to address it now. Or if I don't address it now, I'll never address it, which is just a figment of my mind. So I almost console a part of myself to say, we will address it, I assure you. We will participate and engage in it completely. We just won't do it right now. Does that make sense? I know that sounds crazy.
Yeah, but I don't even like the song. It sounds like I want it to be good. Anyway, yeah, I'll just.
I mean, I would, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say it could, like, I know you're saying it might be a subtle agitation, but it sounds like it falls into a subtle dullness. Because if you're saying, like, if you were just to count your breath or go back to your breath, your mind might have fixation on whatever it is the object of meditation is, but it doesn't have the clarity and intensity that it should, because if it did, then you wouldn't have the song in the back of your head.
You couldn't have the song in the back of your head.
Right, you couldn't have this clarity and intensity on the
That's
single
true.
object and then still have this happening in the background, because you might have maybe the fixation and clarity, but not the intensity, which is a form of subtle dullness. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know.
Yeah,
But it sounds-
it sounds right though,
Yeah.
because
that makes sense.
the coarse and subtle dullness then would have the mirror coarse and subtle agitation, because you're attaching the agitation to the dullness. Oh, I got this song in my head again, and I'm agitated just by saying,
Right.
oh, I got this song in my head again.
Right.
So maybe that's where the agitation comes in. It's the dullness is taking you off your topic. The agitation is when you're frustrated, agitated by being
Yeah.
off topic.
I don't think the agitation, well, maybe that's not
So
right.
it's
I don't think the agitation is like,
John's and
I mean, I think the agitation is a result of you being frustrated that it's stuck in your head. But
Well, this song is just one of many things that are in the back.
sure, of course, of course. Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is why I think
Yeah.
it's agitation.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I'm not an expert on dullness, I tend to be agitated myself.
Uh-huh.
And labeling,
Labeling is also a part of it. I'm sorry, what?
if labeling helps.
Labeling what?
Like thoughts,
That's why I wanted the names for the subtle agitation.
True to Thus's book, I specifically
Yeah.
remember him talking about things in the periphery of your mind and like these really beautiful images
Yeah.
where he explains what that's like. So you might look in there because I
Yeah.
mean, I haven't read past chapter like 3 and it was definitely addressed.
Well, I mean, there's also the idea that, I mean, we've talked about this in the past too, where you can have complete awareness of what's going on and also be thinking about something, and there's something else in the space of your mind, right? Like I'm completely aware. I'm looking at you right now. I have complete intensity of seeing you. Focus. I see. I'm engaging with you. I'm talking to you, right? I see you. At the same time, I'm also thinking about going outside in cold rain and how my shoes are going to get wet, and that just not very enticing to me. There's two things happening. There's something that's happening with my awareness, and then also something else that's occupying the space of my mind, right? And so let me think about this one a little bit more, but there isn't, I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing per se, if you're, and it depends on the type of meditation you're doing, but in particular, like in a shamatha meditation, you can sit and be focusing on your thoughts or watching your thoughts and still hear noise around you and know that that's happening, but it doesn't impact your meditation at all. And the same thing I suspect would be true about songs in your head, or just things that are residuals, that are kind of lingering.
Somehow the inner stuff is more.
It's a little harder.
annoying than the
Sure.
outside noise.
But I also wonder if there's a judgment that's there where you think that it's supposed to be clear and just that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I think that other stuff starts to move away the more you stay focused on your object, and the other things just doesn't have room. It's almost like your focus and your attention has only so much, like if there's a percentage, right? It can only be you can't max out your capacity. So if you feel like there's this other noise that's 30% and there's 70% that you're focusing on your mind, or not your mind, but your object, if you're to increase your focus, will that 30% subside? Because you can't go more than where you're already at. So I'd be curious to know if your meditations, that noise has space there because you've almost kind of given it a waiting room, or, instead of occupying the entire space. That's the first one. The second one too, I also wonder how much of judgment participates in that situation, where you're, kind of dinging yourself for not having like no other thoughts but just your objects, and that frustrates you, and it's kind of chipping into your confidence, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And making you agitated. And there is that kind of mild, that's the thing. It's like, that's something that could be like a mild, I don't want to say a depression, but it's kind of something that chips away to your confidence, where you're like, why can't I do this? What's wrong? Like, why can't I just have one object? Everyone else seems like they're going to be able to do one object but me, and I have like a whole orchestra of different things happening, songs, people, So I'm almost curious too, like, looking at being able to realize that you can do this and you are doing it, and there are different degrees of it, where sometimes there's a little bit more of a like a background, there's a little bit more of an audience, and other times there just aren't. But don't worry about that. They'll be there and then they'll leave. You don't pay attention to them, they'll leave. So just keep staying focused on what it is that you need to be doing, and the rest of it, see what happens and see if that actually makes a difference. Because I think paying attention to it is feeding it a bit. Because you might realize, like, you'll be meditating and you're like so engrossed in your object that you didn't actually even have time to consider whether the song is still in your head. And the minute you stop to check to see if the song's in your head, guess what happens?
In your head.
It's in your head, right? So like, how much are you tapping into that? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me think about it a little bit more as well on my end. Okay, last one. Do jepa. That's taking action when it's not necessary. So you go through steps 1, 2, 3, 4. You're taking action, and now you're in a place where, just like what I said right now, you're so engrossed, right? And it's good, like it's feeling sweet, and you're focused. And what do you decide to do? You decide to change something, or you're like, I should do something. You might decide to be watchful, and you're like, why did you just mess it up? It was so good. You just decided to check in to see if that song was in your head, and it wasn't, and now it's in your head again, right? So the idea of jujepa is that you do something when it's not necessary. Ooh, sorry. And then sorry, just kidding. The antidote is to leave it alone. Sometimes you just need to, it's an experiment, you're going to have to write it and see how it feels. You might actually be in a really good sweet spot, and you just messed with it because you felt like you're so used to like poking and messing with your mind, and you might just be exactly where you need to be. So take its course, watch, and sometimes, you guys, like, the different things that you encounter, you're not going to notice it until even after the meditation, where you sit and you're like, oh, that's what it was. Even in the middle of it, there's just too much happening that you won't even notice. That's okay, but note it. And then other times you'll be just cruising along, and there's never, like, you're doing great. So, but there is something, it does, to me, it feels a little bit like, when I do exercise, but when you get into that groove, that rhythm, when you're like running, the very few times I do, but when I do, when your rhythm and your breath are completely, and your movements are completely in sync, when you get into a state of flow, let yourself warm up and see if you can get into that. and observe and watch. And some days will not be so great, and you'll realize that the 3 bad days resulted and help build your just ability to be disciplined, so that day 4 is actually so much better. It usually works something like that. Okay, nice. Sorry, you guys, that was a very long class. I didn't mean it to be.
That was 2.
That was 2 classes.
Cool.
Yeah. Good. There you go.
Sashi Fuki Jing Meto Chang Rira Lingshi Nyende Gimpadi Sangye Shindu Mikte Umargi Rakun Andak Shimla Juparshu Iram Guru Ratna Mandalakam Viratayami Gewali Kyoku Sunam Yeshe Sok Shin Sunam Yeshe Lejumwe Dampa Kuni Topanisho.
Okay, just take a moment and we're going to close up. Just take a moment and rejoice in being in class tonight and sticking through it. Commend yourself for being here. I mean, really commend yourself for being here and acknowledge that. Give yourself that. The effort. And realizing and feeling how it's not insignificant, that it mattered. It matters to you. And ultimately, because it matters to you, it will matter to others. So with that effort, dedicate all the efforts that you've put into being here tonight to someone in the world who's in need of that, who is unhappy, uncomfortable, anxious, and wish for them all the joy, wish that they can have all the things that they want and find some freedom. And happiness. Thank you, everyone. Really nice. Very good. Thank you.
Jee.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking in there, everyone.